Before we begin, pause for just a second. If you want stories like this to keep finding you, then like and hit the subscribe button. And leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, turn the lights down, stay very still, and let the shadows take over. I grew up in the kind of place people only ever drove past, never to. The road narrowed without warning, cell service dropped to one bar and stayed there, and the land stretched so wide and empty that distance stopped being measured in miles. You counted fence posts instead. Our house sat alone on a few dozen acres outside a blink-and-you-miss-it town called Holler Ridge, tucked into a low valley most maps didn't bother labeling. Back then, I didn't know how isolated it really was. It was just home. The house was an old two-story farmhouse with a sagging front porch and paint that never stayed white for long. My mom kept a small peach orchard south of the house. Nothing fancy. Just enough trees that every summer she'd talk about how good the year was, even when the fruit came out bruised or half-eaten by birds. To the west was open pasture rolling toward a tree line split by a dirt driveway lined with cottonwoods older than anyone in my family. But the north and east sides were woods. Thick, unmanaged woods that ran for miles. The kind you didn't wander into unless you wanted to get lost. Everyone had stories about those woods. Missing cattle, broken fences, sounds at night that didn't match anything familiar. By the time this happened, I was 19 and convinced I knew better. I had just started working at a small carpentry shop in town called Ridgeway Custom Wood. It was run by a stubborn old guy named Luther Cobb, who built cabinets like it was still the 1970s. Luther didn't believe in mornings. He didn't unlock the shop until 10 on the dot. In summer, that schedule felt like a gift. In winter, it meant driving home in pitch black, usually tired, usually alone. My truck didn't help. It was an '87 Chevy pickup that rattled like it was held together by rust and stubbornness. The headlights were dim no matter how many times I replaced the bulbs, and the heater worked only when it felt like it. December came down hard that year. Cold settled into everything, bones, soil, engines. Nights felt heavier, like the dark itself had weight. Luther had me staying late most evenings to finish Christmas orders. I didn't complain. I needed the money. I was saving to move out, maybe closer to town. The night everything went wrong was a Tuesday. I remember because my mom made chili and I told her I'd be home before 10. I wasn't. I'd messed up a dresser drawer, rushed a cut. Luther noticed right as he was locking up. He tapped the edge with his knuckle and said, "Fix it." So I stayed. By the time I shut off the lights and stepped outside, it was close to midnight. The cold hit me like a wall. My breath fogged instantly. The air smelled like damp leaves, distant smoke, and something metallic. I just wanted to get home. Normally I took the highway, but when I reached the on-ramp, red and blue lights blocked the road. State troopers waved everyone off. Accident, one said. Could be a while. I turned around and took the back way. The long way. Miles of dirt roads cutting through wooded land nobody used after dark. About 10 minutes in, that unease started creeping up. Not fear. More like awareness. The feeling you get when someone's standing behind you before you hear them. I shook it off. I'd driven those roads 100 times. Then the road got worse. Potholes. Exposed roots. I slowed, easing through a rough stretch when the truck jolted hard. A loud pop echoed through the trees. The steering wheel jerked, and I fought it long enough to pull onto the shoulder. Flat tire. I climbed out, boots crunching on gravel, and opened the tailgate to grab the spare. That's when my stomach dropped. The toolbox was open, pried apart, latch bent, metal twisted. Everything was gone. Tools. Jet. Spare tire. Even the cheap emergency kit. Someone had stripped it clean. Out there, in the middle of nowhere. I checked my phone. No signal. If I'd been smart, I would have stayed put and waited for daylight. Old Ray Mullen drove that road every morning. But I was tired, cold, and angry at myself. Home was 6 or 7 miles away. I locked the truck, slung my rucksack over my shoulder, and started walking. At first it was quiet. Too quiet. My boots scraped against gravel, the sound carrying farther than it should have. After a while, I noticed movement. Not constant. Just enough. A rustle here. A snap of a twig there. I told myself it was deer. But it kept pace with me. When I slowed, it slowed. When I sped up, it followed. I stopped once and turned around. The road behind me was empty. The trees opened into a small clearing where moonlight touched the ground. That's when I heard him. "Hey there, boy." The word boy cracked sharp at the end. He stood at the edge of the clearing, half in shadow. Tall. Too tall. A long coat hung nearly to his boots. A wide-brimmed hat sat low over gray hair. Beside him was an animal. At first I thought it was a dog. Big. Black. Then my eyes adjusted. His body was wrong. Too lean. Shoulders too high. Legs too long. It stood rigid, eyes locked on me like it was waiting for permission. My legs wouldn't move. "What you doing out here this late?" the man asked, calm. Too calm. I swallowed. Truck broke down. Headed home. He took a step closer. "Road ain't safe at night. A lot of things wander." The animal never blinked. He came close enough that I smelled old cigarettes, damp wool, and something sour underneath. He smiled, but only with his mouth. "Be careful, boy," he said softly. "Not everything out here means well." Then he stepped back. The woods swallowed him whole. When my legs finally worked, they gave out. I hit the ground shaking. I didn't wait to calm down. I ran. I didn't stop until I saw the glow of our porch light. That's when I heard it again. "Hey there, boy." Right behind me. I didn't look back until I crossed into the yard. He stood at the tree line watching. Then he was gone. The next morning, my dad listened quietly as I told him everything. When I finished, he nodded once. "Probably Silas Greer," he said. "Lives past the Northwoods. Folks say he ain't right." I asked how he knew where I was going. Dad didn't answer. We found my truck untouched. No tools. No tracks. Nothing. I don't take the back roads anymore. And I don't walk alone at night. Some things out there aren't lost. They're waiting. I grew up in a place people only talked about when they were explaining how far they lived from anything worth doing. It wasn't really a town. Calling it a village felt generous. A handful of streets, a short row of shops that closed early, and fields stretching out in every direction like the land was slowly trying to swallow the place whole. Everyone knew everyone. That wasn't comforting. It was suffocating. By the time I was 19, I knew which houses argued at night, which families were drowning in debt, and which men you didn't make eye contact with in the pub. News didn't travel fast there. It didn't need to. It lingered. If you messed up once, people remembered it longer than you did. I spent most of my childhood wanting to leave. The city was only about 25 minutes away by bus, but mentally it felt like another world. Lights stayed on late. People walked fast and didn't care who you were. Nobody asked about your family or your past. The problem was the bus. There was one route in and one route out. The last one home left at 8 sharp. Miss it and you were stranded unless you had taxi money or a couch to crash on. That December felt heavier than usual. I just quit a job I hated, stacking shelves overnight in a place that smelled like cardboard and bleach. I told myself I'd find something better. Weeks passed. Nothing happened. I stayed up late, slept later, restless in a way I couldn't explain without sounding dramatic. That's when I started going to the casino. Not because I loved gambling. I didn't. I liked the noise, the constant movement, the feeling that time didn't matter inside those walls. You could sit there for hours and nobody rushed you out. Most nights I went with friends. That night I went alone. I remember standing in my room pulling on a jacket that wasn't warm enough, checking my pockets. "Don't stay late," my mom called from downstairs. "I won't," I lied automatically. Inside the casino, everything was warm and artificial. Lights reflected off polished floors. Machines chimed constantly. I played blackjack because it felt controlled. It wasn't. Within 2 hours, I was broke. I stared at the table longer than I should have, like the cards might rearrange themselves out of pity. They didn't. I checked my phone. 7:12 p.m. My stomach dropped. I left immediately, heart sinking as I hurried through the streets. By the time I reached the bus stop, the digital sign already read, "Departed." I stood there staring at it, breathing hard, feeling stupid. A taxi would have cost more than I had. Calling a friend wasn't an option. Everyone lived across the city or had work in the morning. That left the late bus. It didn't stop in the village itself. It stopped near the woods. I didn't like that, but I told myself I'd walked it before. The bus ride back was quiet. A couple whispered upstairs. A man slept with his hood pulled low. I replayed every bad decision of the night. I was so lost in my thoughts that I missed my stop. The doors opened at the next shelter instead. Cold air rushed in like punishment. December had turned the snow into slush. Everything smelled wet and metallic. I stood there alone under humming street lights and weighed my options. Road or woods? I sighed and headed toward the path. During the day it was narrow but familiar. At night it felt smaller, like it had shrunk when no one was watching. Chain link fence to my right. Wooden posts and wire to my left. Beyond that, open field swallowed by darkness. My shoes squelched with every step. Somewhere far off, a train horn echoed through the cold air. Long and hollow. It made everything feel exposed. I reached the railway bridge. Concrete walls streaked with rust. Graffiti layered over itself like arguments frozen in paint. My footsteps sounded louder under it, sharper, bouncing back at me. On the other side, the land opened into the flats. During the day it was ugly but harmless. At night it felt unfinished, like someone cleared the land and walked away halfway through. A dark factory sat ahead, windows black, gates locked. Old car shells lay half sunk in mud. That's when I noticed how quiet it was. No wind, no traffic, no animals. I pulled my headphones down around my neck. The silence pressed in immediately. That was when the feeling started. Not fear. Not yet. It was the sensation you get when you're about to step into traffic and your body reacts before your brain does. Like something behind me mattered. I stopped. Listened. Nothing. Tired? I muttered. I kept walking, slower now. Every sound felt amplified. My shoes pulling free of mud. The soft clink of my jacket zipper. I thought about turning back. Then the worst section came. To my right, the factory fence ran tall and unbroken, metal panels topped with barbed wire catching faint reflections. To my left, the woods began abruptly. No edge, just darkness swallowing everything beyond the first few trunks. I kept my hand on the fence. My foot caught on something buried. I went down hard, hands and knees slamming into cold mud. The breath knocked out of me. I stayed there longer than I should have. That's when I heard it. Snap. Crunch. It moved with weight. I turned fast. He stepped out of the trees like he'd been standing there the whole time. Tall. Broad shoulders under a dark jacket. Long hair hanging forward, hiding his face. He didn't speak. Didn't rush. Just stood there about 15 feet away. Every warning signal in my body went off at once. I tried to talk, to sound casual, but what came out wasn't words. Just noise. He took one step toward me. Slow. Certain. That was enough. I ran. I didn't think about direction. I didn't think about falling. Mud splashed up my legs. My lungs burned. I could hear him behind me, not sprinting, not shouting, just steady footsteps. Don't fall, I gasped. Don't fall. The ground firmed suddenly. I burst out of the flats and into the park. I didn't hear him anymore. I didn't slow down. I ran past dark houses, porch lights flicking on as I tore through the estate like something was chasing me. Because something was. My hands shook so badly I dropped my keys twice outside my door. I slammed it shut and locked it, then leaned against it, gasping. I never saw him again. I don't know how long he followed me. I don't know how close he got. I don't know what he wanted. I don't try to figure it out. Some nights, getting home is enough. December had a way of turning my town into something unrecognizable. The roads emptied earlier. The stores closed sooner. Even familiar houses looked different once the snow piled up and the wind started pushing it sideways through the streets. I lived alone then, renting a small house just outside town limits. Nothing special. One floor, narrow hallway, a porch that creaked no matter how gently you stepped on it. Behind the house was open land that stretched out toward a thin tree line and eventually a back road almost a mile away. No fence, just snow and darkness. That night, the storm rolled in faster than expected. By early evening, the wind was already rattling the windows hard enough to make them shiver in their frames. Snow slammed into the siding at an angle that felt wrong, like gravity had given up trying to keep things orderly. I sat on the couch with a blanket pulled up to my chest, half watching something forgettable on TV. The fireplace popped occasionally, the only sound that felt normal. Everything else was too loud, too sharp. At some point, I stood and walked to the sliding glass door that faced the yard. At first, all I could see was white. Snow flying so thick it erased distance. Visibility was awful. Then something darker moved through it. I leaned closer to the glass. A figure. Someone was walking through my backyard. Not running. Not stumbling. Just walking. Slow and steady, like it was a mild afternoon instead of a full winter storm. Hat slightly down. Coat pulled tight. I couldn't see their face. My stomach tightened. The yard was big enough that someone cutting through wasn't impossible, but nobody did it. Especially not during a storm like that. The figure moved left to right, calm and deliberate, until the snow swallowed them near the tree line. I stood there longer than I meant to, waiting. They didn't come back into view. I told myself it was probably someone whose car broke down, or a neighbor taking a shortcut they shouldn't. Still, something about the way they walked bothered me. No hesitation. No urgency. Just direction. I went back to the couch, but the comfort was gone. Every sound felt amplified. The wind, the fire, even the refrigerator cycling on made me flinch. About 5 minutes later, someone knocked on my front door. I froze. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't weak. 3 solid knocks. Controlled. Intentional. I didn't answer. Another knock followed. Same rhythm. I stood slowly and walked to the door, keeping my steps quiet. I cracked it open just enough to see outside, keeping the chain latched. A man stood on my porch. Heavy winter jacket. Snow clinging to his shoulders. His skin was pale, his nose bright red, the way people look when they've been cold too long. His breath came out in sharp clouds. "Hey," he said, forcing a small smile. "Sorry to bother you." His voice shook just enough to sound real. "I'm waiting on a ride," he continued. "My phone died. They're supposed to be close, but..." He gestured vaguely at the storm. "Any chance I could warm up for a minute?" Up close, I couldn't tell if he was the same person I'd seen in the yard. Similar build. Similar height. Fear does funny things to memory. "I don't really let people in," I said carefully. He nodded quickly. "I get it. Totally. I don't blame you. That should have made me feel better. It didn't." I glanced past him. The street was empty. No headlights. No movement. Just snow being driven sideways by the wind. "I can let you wait on the porch," I said. "There's an overhang. Keeps the snow off." His smile faded just slightly. "Yeah," he said after a pause. "That's fine." I closed the door and locked it before he could say anything else. Through the small window beside the door, I watched him move to the chair near the wall and sit down. I told myself I'd done the right thing. Still, guilt crept in. It was dangerous cold. I went upstairs and dug through the closet until I found an old jacket I hadn't worn in years. Too big, torn at the cuff, but warm. I headed back down, jacket in hand, fingers already reaching for the deadbolt. That's when something made me stop. No sound, no movement, just a pressure in my chest that said don't. I leaned forward and looked through the peephole. The man was no longer sitting. He was standing directly in front of the door, close enough that I could see one eye through the warped glass. His hand rested on the handle, not knocking, not waiting, just holding it like he was ready. My heart slammed so hard I thought he might hear it. I stepped back slowly, my breath shallow and loud in my ears. I pulled my phone out with shaking hands and dialed 911, whispering as soon as the operator answered. "There's a man on my porch," I said. "I think he's trying to get inside." She asked questions. Address, description, told me officers were on their way. While she spoke, I stared at the door. It didn't move. When she told me to stay inside and remain quiet, I nodded even though she couldn't see me. After a minute, I crept back to the peephole. The porch was empty. No man. No footprints visible through the blowing snow. Nothing. The police arrived about 20 minutes later. They searched the area, walked the yard, checked the tree line. They found nothing. They told me I probably did the right thing. I didn't sleep that night. Sometimes I still think about what would have happened if I'd opened the door. If guilt had outweighed instinct. And sometimes on stormy December nights, when the wind hits just right, I swear I hear 3 steady knocks carried through the sound of snow and darkness. I wasn't supposed to be babysitting that night. It was 3 days before Christmas, and I already had plans to stay home, wrap gifts, and pretend I wasn't stressing about money. But my aunt called last minute, said she and her husband had an emergency dinner and needed someone they trusted. I'd watched my cousin enough times that it felt routine. That was my first mistake. Their house sat on a quiet street at the edge of town, the kind of place where every driveway had holiday lights and inflatable decorations sagging under a thin layer of snow. Inside it smelled like pine and cinnamon. Warm. Safe. My cousin Lily was already asleep upstairs. 2 years old. Easy night, I thought. I'd just sit on the couch, watch TV, and wait. The baby monitor was on the coffee table. Video screen dark. Sound low. I didn't think about it again for almost an hour. Around 9:40 p.m., the monitor crackled. At first, it was just static. A faint hiss like a radio not quite tuned in. I glanced down, expecting to hear Lily shift or mumble in her sleep. Instead, the screen flickered to life. The camera showed Lily's room, washed in pale green night vision. Her crib sat exactly where it should. Stuffed animals lined the rails. Nothing looked wrong. Then the audio changed. A low sound came through the speaker. Not crying. Not breathing. Movement. I sat up straighter, staring at the screen. The sound grew clearer, heavier. Like someone slowly shifting their weight on carpet. I muted the TV completely. The movement continued for several seconds, then stopped. I waited for Lily to cry. She didn't. I grabbed the monitor and stood, telling myself it was interference. Old houses had bad wiring. Cheap electronics glitched all the time. Still, I went upstairs. Her door was closed. I opened it slowly. Lily slept on her side, thumb in her mouth, chest rising and falling evenly. The room was exactly how it should be. No shadows. No strange smells. No reason for fear. I stood there longer than necessary, listening. Nothing. I went back downstairs more annoyed than scared. 10 minutes later, the monitor turned on again. This time there was no static. The video feed came up instantly. Someone was standing next to the crib. I froze. The camera angle didn't show their face. Just a tall shape, blocking part of the night light's glow. Long arms resting on the crib rail. The figure didn't move. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might drown out the sound, but the audio was worse. Slow breathing. Not a child's. It controlled. Too steady. I bolted up the stairs. Halfway up, the monitor screamed. A sharp, sudden noise burst from the speaker, making me stumble. I nearly dropped it. When I looked down again, the screen was dark. The feed was gone. I reached Lily's door and threw it open. The room was empty. Lily was still asleep. The crib was untouched. No one stood there. No door or window was open. I checked the closet, under the crib, behind the curtains. Nothing. I stood in the middle of the room, shaking, trying to slow my breathing. Then Lily stirred. She opened her eyes and looked straight past me toward the corner of the room. Her face changed. Not scared. Not confused. Curious. "Hi," she whispered. Every muscle in my body locked up. "Who are you talking to?" I asked, hating how thin my voice sounded. She smiled slightly. "The man." I scooped her up so fast she squeaked in surprise. I didn't care if I scared her. I carried her downstairs, grabbed my coat and keys, and went straight out the front door. Snow crunched under my shoes. My breath came out in short bursts. I strapped Lily into her car seat with shaking hands and called my aunt before I even closed the door. She didn't answer. I started the car. The baby monitor, still in my hand, crackled one last time. A voice came through it. Not Lily's. "Don't take her." I threw the monitor into the snow. We stayed in the car until my aunt called back, frantic and confused. She told me to bring Lily to the restaurant they were at. I didn't argue. They never found anything wrong with the monitor. No recordings. No stored footage. No explanation. They replaced it anyway. I never babysat there again. But sometimes when I'm alone at night, my phone screen will light up out of nowhere. For just a second, it shows a green-tinted image of a crib, and then it goes dark. I found the job on a corkboard at the grocery store. That should have been my first warning. It was a handwritten note, taped crookedly near the exit. No phone number ripped off at the bottom like most ads. Just a name, an address, and a message written in thick black marker. Babysitter needed. One night only. No rate listed. No age of the child. No details. I stood there longer than I should have, rereading it while people brushed past me with carts. I was between jobs, behind on rent, and desperate enough to ignore the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. I wrote down the address. The house was on the far edge of town, beyond the neighborhoods with Christmas lights and trimmed lawns. Snow covered the road in uneven patches, my headlights cutting narrow tunnels through the darkness. The GPS tried to reroute me twice before finally giving up and telling me I'd arrived. The house sat alone. No decorations. No lights on outside. Just a two-story place with dark windows and a long driveway half buried in snow. I parked and sat there for a moment, engine running, breath fogging the windshield. I almost left. Then the front porch light flicked on. A man opened the door before I even reached the steps. Tall. Thin. He smiled too quickly, like he'd been waiting behind the door the whole time. "You're early," he said. I checked my phone. I wasn't. Inside, the house smelled old. Not dirty, just unused. Like rooms that hadn't been lived in for a long time. The furniture was sparse. The walls bare. No family photos. No Christmas decorations. That bothered me more than I expected. "The child?" I asked. He gestured upstairs. "Sleeping." I asked how old. He hesitated. 6, he said finally. His wife appeared briefly from the kitchen. She didn't smile, didn't introduce herself, just nodded once and disappeared back down the hallway. They explained the rules quickly. Don't wake the child. Don't go into the back room upstairs. Don't answer the phone if it rings. They'd be back before midnight. Then they left. The door closed too quietly behind them. I sat on the couch, jacket still on, listening to the house settle. Pipes clicked. Something thumped faintly upstairs. The silence felt staged, like a set waiting for actors to return. Around 9:15 I heard footsteps. Light. Slow. I froze, staring up at the ceiling. I told myself it was the child getting up for water. I waited for crying. Nothing. I called up the stairs softly. Hey buddy? You okay? No answer. The footsteps continued. Back and forth. Short steps. Too deliberate. I climbed halfway up the stairs and stopped. At the top, the hallway light was on. It hadn't been before. I could see the child's bedroom door at the end. Closed. The back room door, also closed. A third door stood open slightly. I hadn't noticed it earlier. A soft sound came from inside it. Breathing. I took another step, heart pounding hard enough to hurt. The floor creaked under my foot. The breathing stopped instantly. I backed down the stairs, pulse roaring in my ears. I sat back on the couch and grabbed my phone, pretending to scroll while watching the staircase from the corner of my eye. At 9:32 the house phone rang. Loud. Sure. Echoing through the rooms. I stared at it. The man's voice echoed in my head. Don't answer the phone. It rang again. And again. I stood up, every instinct screaming at me to leave. I went to the front door and tried the handle. Locked. The deadbolt was turned. I hadn't locked it. The phone stopped ringing. Something moved upstairs. Faster this time. Heavier. A child's voice drifted down the stairs. Are you my babysitter? My throat went dry. Yeah, I called back, forcing calm. Go back to bed. Silence. Then the voice again. Closer. You're not the one from before. Every hair on my arm stood up. I grabbed the fireplace poker and backed toward the stairs just as the child stepped into view. He was pale. Too pale. Dark circles under his eyes. He smiled without showing teeth. Can you read me a story? He asked. Behind him in the hallway, the back room door slowly opened. Something tall shifted inside it. I didn't think. I ran. The front door wouldn't open. I slammed into it once, twice. The lock didn't budge. Behind me, footsteps hit the stairs. Fast. Heavy. The child laughed. I smashed the side window with a poker, glass exploding outward into the snow. Cold air rushed in. Hands grabbed my jacket as I climbed through. Fingers tight. Strong. I kicked, tearing free, and hit the ground hard. I didn't stop running until my lungs burned and the house disappeared behind trees. The police found the house the next day. Empty. No furniture. No phone. No signs of a family ever living there. The corkboard ad was gone. So was the street sign. And sometimes when my phone rings late at night from an unknown number, I let it ring. Because I'm afraid of what might answer if I don't.